Hello and welcome to Timeless with Julie Hartman Live. It is Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. I'm Julie Hartman, and it is great, as always, to be with you, especially on a day like today, which I know many of us have been waiting for some months. 844-861-5537 is the call-in number, 844-861-5537. And as always, you can use the live chat. Oh my gosh. As I said, I can't believe that today is the day. We've been talking about this for so long. So much has happened over the past few months between various assassination attempts, certain candidates dropping out at the last minute, and it's difficult to believe that the day is here. Now, I was thinking this morning that we as Americans don't always appreciate how lucky we are to participate in a day like today. 350 million people live in the United States. Now, that's a lot of people. But if you compare that against how many people there are in the world, 8 billion, that's a very small fraction. Only 4% of the world is American. And yet, as we know, this American election has such a great ripple effect on much of the rest of the world. I have been getting text messages this morning on WhatsApp from many of my friends around the world, and they are saying that they are anxiously awaiting the results of today. Now, how many times does that happen on the other end? How many times do we Americans go, I'm anxiously awaiting the results of X country's elections or Y country's elections? We don't often do that because they do not have the same effect on us as our election has on much of the rest of the world. And so today, I think I really am especially aware of how lucky I am to be one of those 350 million people who gets to exercise her right to vote and whose vote does affect the lives of so many other people. So it's not just that we have a responsibility to our country, we really have a responsibility to the world in the way that we choose to act today. Well, every episode of Timeless, I hope, is a special one, but I especially think the special ones are ones when we have in-studio guests, and today is one of those days. I'm so excited to welcome a new friend of mine and someone who actually is here because he is a listener of Timeless and Dennis and Julie. He's from Venezuela. He has been in the United States for a few months or a few weeks now, and he was kind enough to email me to express his appreciation for our work. And I was able to meet him, and I said, hey, why don't you come on? So everyone, I'd love to introduce you to Joaquín Machado.
Hi,
You are not hearing this, Joaquín, but I am assured from the producer's dungeon that there's rapturous applause, at least over a sound effect. Welcome to Timeless.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for inviting me.
How do you feel being here? I know that you came here about 15 minutes ago and you were remarking on some elements of the studio. How is it?
Well, it's a little surreal to be here in person, but it's very nice. I'm one of the things that was immediately obvious to me was how much the people here get along with each other. And I think that's important. Wow,
we put on a good act, don't we?
Oh, really? Yeah. It's an act.
No, we do. We get along beautifully. Yeah. 99% of the time.
Yeah, of course, there's always going to be tough days.
No, we really do. I feel very, very privileged to work with all of the people in there. They're really fantastic. And you were saying that you couldn't believe that this was the same room, the Dennis and Julie set and the Timeless set.
It's kind of surreal.
Oh, really?
One of the staff described it as surreal, and I concur.
Oh.
It's very, very strange to see both settings in the same room, and they look like they're lit differently. So it's like it's.
Well, they are lit differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool working in a studio every day. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. You know, I had a person on the show a few weeks ago named Darius Darty, and I actually met him at my local coffee store. I think I was wearing a MAGA hat that day. I kind of like doing that these days to just test out the waters to see how people would react in Los Angeles. And we struck up a conversation, and then he came on the show, and then you were emailing me, and now you're on the show. And I think it proves that I'm the random person finder.
I will say this. I've been seeing a lot of people are braving it now to wear MAGA hats and wear their political affiliations on their persons. I've seen people wearing pro-Trump shirts and people are speaking out a little bit more, and I think that's probably a good thing.
Well, Elon Musk said something that really made an impression on me. He said, there's so much power in public recognition and normalizing MAGA publicly, and I've been adopting that despite the hairy eyeballs that I sometimes invite from people in Los Angeles. But I just want to tell you all that Joaquin wrote such thoughtful emails to me, and he really talked about what it is like to grow up and live and work in Venezuela, and some of the differences that he observes between Venezuela and the United States, and perhaps even more harrowingly, some of the similarities.
Yeah.
So I'd love to discuss that with you today, especially on Election Day. We're so privileged to have someone like you with such keen insights. So just tell us, Joaquin, give us a 101 on you. Where did you grow up? What do you do for a living? Anything you care to share.
All right, fair enough. Well, I grew up in Caracas. Now a little bit more towards the suburbs. We moved to the suburbs when I was a little kid, and
I'm so sorry. This is so rude to pause you.
Yes.
Is Joaquin's mic level okay, or does he need to speak up a bit? I think you should speak up a little. Just people have observed they can't quite hear. So
no
so
problem.
Sorry. Go on.
Absolutely. I grew up in Caracas. We moved to the suburbs. Oh, sorry. We moved to the suburbs when I was a little kid. And, things were pretty much very similar to Europe, I suppose, until 1998. And that's when the whole socialist revolution started. And I lived, my youth was lived in that environment. And it was an environment of great instability and uncertainty for most people because you didn't know what was going to happen. One of these things I always tell people is there's no way to guarantee that society is going to prosper. For that to happen, a bunch of things have to align. You have to have like the proper framework, the proper incentives. People have to have a culture that invites them to do the work necessary in order for a culture to thrive. But you can impoverish it, you can destroy it with a single document, by signing a decree. And every so often, every week, there was a new decree signed that would do something to the markets or to the social order of Venezuela. And so many people felt uncomfortable, and that created a massive exodus. Most of the people I grew up with are probably not living there anymore.
Where did they go?
Many of them, a surprisingly large number of them, went to Florida. To Miami, Florida, yeah. Because
why is that surprising?
Well, I guess it shouldn't be. It's quite nearby. But it's surprising because of the language barrier, because we're surrounded by other countries that speak the same language. But no, many people came here to the United States, to Florida specifically. Some people went to Spain, and other people went to Panama and Colombia and the surrounding Latin American countries, for the most part. Although I do have a couple of friends in Australia, of all places. Yeah.
That's quite the journey.
It is. It's like 20 hours or something like that. And, a lot of people started fleeing because of the massive instability that we had to suffer through during these early times.
In 98.
From 98 onwards. I mean, it got progressively more unpredictable and worse. And like the really tough times, I guess, came after 2013 when they started instituting price controls. Because before that, most of the things that the government had done were create social programs that, don't get me wrong, did help a lot of people, but they weren't unsustainable economically. And so they created an environment, a hyperinflationary environment. And in order for people to defend from hyperinflation, like, let's say we used to have a business. Let's say you bought a box, anything, a box of Coca-Colas, like a pallet of Coca-Colas. You buy the pallet for 100, and you know that the next time around, when the next time comes to buy that pallet, you're going to have to pay 200. You're not going to pay 100 again. So you have to factor that into the pricing, because it's a hyperinflationary environment. So the government said, no, you can only get like 30% profit from it. And so you could you would buy it, you sell it at the profit controlled price, and then you wouldn't be able to buy it again.
Wow.
And so many people just shut down. They closed the businesses. And so one of the parallels that you mentioned makes me very nervous to hear talk about price gouging, because that's exactly the kind of rhetoric that was used around that sort of price control legislation policy.
Joaquin and I were able to meet off the air last week, or perhaps the week before, and Joaquin said something quite chilling to me. He said, I don't come from, just another country. I come to you from the future of your country. And I went, oh no. He's saying if things, go
things go the way,
the way we all hope that
like
they don't.
like that. Have you seen Pirates of the Caribbean, or is this
I have
before
not,
your time?
I have not. No, I mean, Sean knows this. He makes references to cinema, and I'm so sorry. I don't watch a lot of TV.
Well, yeah, best start believing in socialism stories because you're in one.
Oh, great. Yeah. So help me understand, Joaquin. You said in '98 is when things really changed.
Yeah.
What are some of the most stark differences between your pre-'98 life and your post-'98 life? When Hugo Chavez took over, that is.
Well, it's a little fuzzy, but from what I can remember, the first thing he did was change the Constitution. And so the entire legal framework of the country changed.
How so?
Well, they celebrated it as a coming together of the entire peoples of different sectors, of all the different, representing every single sector of society, including the native peoples and all that stuff. And they created this giant, massive assembly where they would sit, I don't know, it was like 300 or 400 people from society, and they sat and they drafted a brand new constitution.
What did it say?
Well, many people love it. I mean, it's very complete, but it's huge. It's too big. It's too big, and it has too many things. And sometimes, according to some of the legal scholars, I'm not a legal scholar, but according to some of the legal scholars, some of the articles contradict some of the other articles because it's just so huge. But the one thing that it did was eliminate the Senate. So it only left because the Senate. Our Senate was like your Senate. It was representative because we were a federation, sort of. Yeah. It eliminated all that. It created a single chamber Congress with only elected representatives according to population, and that's it. So yeah, it left us I created a new government powers. It created the moral power and the electoral power.
The moral power?
Yes.
What's the moral power?
That's interesting. Doesn't it sound interesting? It's a way to legitimize. In reality, it turned out to be a way to legitimize the government.
Okay. But what does it do? What?
It's the controllership. It took some of the, I suppose, functions of the Senate, the Congress, to make sure that the power of the purse, I suppose, and to control the power of the purse, and to control, it's like internal affairs in a police department, I would suppose.
So they basically just seized a lot of mechanisms of power that were previously more spread out or divided.
And they consolidated that into a moral power. That's one of the interesting features of that constitution. Turns out it sounds like a good idea, but if you place a bunch of partisan ideologues in the moral power, then what it does is it becomes a way to legitimize whatever the government does and persecute those people who don't fall within the purview of the that don't commit ideologically with the project. So.
How did culture change? How have you observed? I mean, I know in my lifetime, and I'm 25 years old, I have seen a big cultural shift in the United States. I remember in my youth, we were more patriotic. Certainly, I remember the advent of wokeism and how that has transformed things. I mean, when I was young, I think the first time I ever learned what a transgender individual was when I was 16 years old. So I've noticed a marked shift. How have you noticed? Have you noticed any shifts?
Oh, there are. But in my country or in yours?
Let's start with yours.
All right. Well, one of the things I've had the joy, the great joy of joining you guys for the Shabbat dinner. And one of the things that I told the people at Shabbat was that I've been hearing a lot of talk about post-Christian society, post-Christianity. There are some people in the internet who are engaged in trying to come up with a new moral order after Christianity, because they think that Christianity and Judeo-Christianity is somehow polluted by the narrative substrate that gives it life, actually. And so they're trying to create a philosophical moral order from scratch, from logic, I guess.
Right.
From pure logic. And those people who are trying to do that, they have to realize there is no post-Christian society. The post-Christian society is going to turn out to be the pre-Mosaic society.
So you've noticed that in Venezuela, that there's a similar project.
Yeah, I suppose so. Because people have forgotten the Ten Commandments. They don't abide by them anymore. And
Venezuela is a pretty Catholic country.
It is,
right?
But people pay very loose attention to the Ten Commandments themselves. Everything is... I mean, it's unfair to paint the entire population this way, because there are very many devout and pious people. But the people in power and the people who move and shake things, I suppose you could say, the people in the media, whether it be from the government and even from those who oppose the government, they think that, my impression is that many of them think that religion is just it's fairy tales for children.
It's a pagan superstition, as Jordan Peterson would say.
Correct.
Yeah. Wow, but that is more surprising to me in Latin America than it is in America, because Latin America is so strongly, at least historically, Catholic.
Catholic, yes. It's like 96% or something like that. The thing is, you can be religious in name only.
You can be a Kino.
Yeah, you
Christian
can be,
in name only.
Yeah.
Or a Gino.
Or a Gino. You can be religious in name only.
Can you be a Mino, a Muslim in name? Yeah, you can.
I guess you could.
Yeah.
I guess
you are probably, but yeah.
I guess you could. So people have completely done away with the Ten Commandments, and that's another parallel that I've been seeing here, that people are doing away with the Ten Commandments as well.
So when you look at the United States, you mentioned price gouging.
Yeah.
What else concerns you?
Well,
culturally, it doesn't have to confine to policy. It can be culturally, literally anything.
Well, the abandonment of religion is a big one.
Yeah.
Well, I guess one of the things that concerns me the most is the polarization of society. Now, this is a very delicate, touchy subject, because people are going to be, they confuse the need to diminish polarization with capitulation to evil, I suppose, with compromising your principles.
Okay.
And there is a way in which these things can both be had. You don't need to compromise your principles, but you have to realize that when it comes to politics, you have to have a well-ordered, and this is a very Christian idea, well-ordered love. You have to have well-ordered, I suppose, priorities.
Right.
You're not going to sacrifice your relationship with God because of your whims, and you're not going to sacrifice your health because of somebody in your immediate circle, and you're not going to sacrifice people in your immediate circle to people in the community, and you're not going to sacrifice people in the community to a political affiliation. So you have to have like a well-ordered hierarchical system of affiliations, let's say that. And one of the things that when you have a well-regulated, I suppose, well-ordered system of affiliations, you start being able to have conversations with people in your immediate circle about politics without, like, if you make it clear from the get-go, this is not going to affect our relationship, you can have conversations in which you agree to disagree, and there doesn't have to be like this falling out and the breakup of families.
So why does the polarization concern you? I mean, it concerns a lot of people, but why did you identify that as one of the top things?
Well, because the fraying of the social order is one of the conditions that you need in order for government to take over like there's a principle in the social doctrine of Christianity. It's called subsidiarity. So you don't give to government what you could have given to other subsidiary institutions like associations, charities, the family, friendships. Okay, and if you fray those relationships, then the government takes over all those functions. And so it's a problem A, problem B. Like if you could fall off this side of the cliff, or you could fall off this side of the cliff. And you want to defend your principles, but you don't want to play that other game where society just frays and it's over.
Life is such a balancing act because, on the one hand, well, let me back up. I was interviewing someone a few months ago named John Moody, who was the New York Times or the Time Magazine Vatican correspondent in the 90s. And he wrote a fantastic biography on Pope John Paul II, who is probably my favorite pope. And I know I'm not alone in that opinion. And I asked Mr. Moody on the air, how do you think Pope John Paul II would have handled the Israel-Palestine conflict or the Russia-Ukraine conflict? And because as you know, as a Catholic, I mean, Pope John Paul II, he grew up under Nazism in Poland, and then he later in his adolescence, the communists took over, and when he was Pope, I mean, he was largely responsible for ending the Cold War. Mm-hmm. And John Moody said an answer I don't think I'll ever forget. He said, I think Pope John Paul II would have approached them with this kind of radical love. And I thought, wow, that is such a good answer. And that's so true of Pope John Paul II, because he was very shrewd. He was uncompromising in his allegiance to God. But he also approached people with a kind of radical love. And John Moody said, I think he would have, gone to the Palestinian side and gone to the Israeli side and really kind of in a different but similar way related to them. And I sort of view that with the political polarization here in America, where on the one hand, it's a balancing act because I am uncompromising in my principles. I think that Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party is destroying the United States of America, utterly destroying them. And I will not back down from that belief. Yeah. But at the same time, I just posted on Instagram, Joaquin, a selfie with my roommate, my darling roommate, and she's holding up her Kamala ballot and I'm holding up my Trump ballot, and we're best friends. And so many of my best friends are voting for Kamala, even though I'm voting for Trump. Yep. And I approach them with a radical love. I'm so happy for their presence in my life. They teach me all kinds of things. I hope sometimes they listen to me too. And most of all, people's life experiences inform their beliefs.
That's correct.
And you have to understand that. So that's just to say, I agree with you about your observations about polarization. Now, Joaquin, when we were at Shabbat, you told a story to the table which riveted all of us about the loss of your business. If you're comfortable sharing that, would you mind?
Well, yeah, without going into too many details, but
of course.
During the pandemic, and I guess as a result of the sanctions imposed upon government people by the Trump administration, there was a very strong gasoline crunch in the country. And we had a business associated with gas and oil, and it was not a very large business by any means, but we had it so that we opened up at sun up and we closed at sunset.
Okay.
Because there were security issues. Because this is one of the things about the fraying of the social order. Things become unsafe, which is something we can also talk about.
Yeah.
With Tren de Aragua and all that. There's stuff there. So our personnel size and us, we would work 12 hours, and suddenly we get a letter from the government that the business has to be open 24/7, and that in order to guarantee that we are going to be able to, bring the service to the population, they are going to give us the protection of the National Guard.
Oh, lucky you.
So that meant that we had to stay there and sometimes sleep there with the National Guards on mattresses on the floor. And we spent about a month operating under those conditions, a little less.
Because they wanted more gasoline output because of the
gasoline.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a scarcity, really.
Yes.
And they were trying to guarantee continuity of service.
Okay.
Or so, that's what they said. And we spent a month operating under those conditions and doing everything in our power, what we could and what we couldn't do, in order to remain open. And it took a very heavy toll on us, because
Of course. My gosh, you're working 24 hours a day.
Yeah, we're sleeping 2 hours a day by shifts. Okay, and so
and the National Guard is there with you.
Yes.
Supposedly, again, forgive me, to
Guarantee our security, our safety.
And why would your safety be compromised?
Because of the high criminality that supposedly doesn't exist.
And what would they rob?
Us.
Okay, but
the proceeds from cash, from the gasoline.
I see.
Cash,
okay.
or merchandise or whatever.
I see.
Yeah, the stuff.
So after a month, you said
we got a letter that was backdated a month. So this decision had been made 3 days before we started working this way. It gave us 72 hours to leave because we didn't guarantee the continuity of service.
Okay.
But we did. But the decision had already been made. So they gave us 72 hours to remove everything that we have, our business of 38 years, and we no longer have it.
And what did they do with it?
Well, they gave it to, you'll hear in the internet when you say that Venezuela is a socialist country, they say, no, 90% of Venezuela is owned by private corporations. The government gave it to a private corporation that had been created
by the government.
By somebody from the government.
Right.
During the pandemic, at a time where the public registries were closed, so nobody else was able to create any companies. So it had been created a month before. So, the registries were closed, and we're like, how did this new company emerge? They gave it to that company, and
well, that's like communist China. There are these private corporations that are run by people within the government, or they have to have the approval and intense supervision of the government in order to function. Wow.
Well, in Russia, they were called the apparatchiks.
That's right.
Right. So.
Wow. So what did you do, Joaquin, when your business was taken away from you?
We moved everything out, and
how did you get by? Did you have money saved?
We had a little savings, but I started doing odd jobs. And
what jobs?
Well, for a little while I baked cakes. But
say more. this whole how long are we into the episode? What, 25 minutes, and he's just saying he bakes cakes?
Yeah, sometimes. But that didn't work out so well. So although the cakes are good. But then I got approached by a friend of the family, and who was tasked with writing a biography for the first mayor of the municipality where I was born. And he needed help with that, and so I co-wrote that with him, and unfortunately he passed away, and I finished the book.
So what is daily life in Venezuela like? Like when you get on the plane, fly home, get off the plane?
Wow.
What?
Everything is a little more ruddy and smaller and less than it could have been, and you know it because the contrast really hits you when you're coming out from outside. Like the first thing, let me explain it the other way around, because I don't want to be mean to my own country because it's my country. But when you come from Venezuela here, you feel like a guppy that's been taken out of a fish tank and put in the middle of the Great Lakes. Look
what
around.
Do you mean by that?
Well, everything is huge and beautiful and expansive and lovely, and when you go back, I guess what hits you is the idea of what could have been, had it been different. Because this is one of the things that socialism does, that you don't notice it. It acts in a way such that your society doesn't go back so much as it just stops advancing. It's stagnation.
That's a really important insight.
Yeah. So everything is going to feel the same for a bunch of years. And then you go to Tokyo and you see that their buildings have structures that can withstand earthquakes because they use moving beams and
That's right.
and they light up and they're these beautiful tall buildings and the lights and the people and you're just like why does my country feel like it's still 2005?
Well, the encroachment is more effective if it's gradual, because if your quality of life changes dramatically from one day to the next, few people will put up with that. But what's scary for me as an American is just seeing over time the small chipping away of things. And then it's like, oh, well, this is not that big of a deal, or okay, we'll let that go. It's not affecting things that much. And then 10 years later, you look back and you're like, whoa, that actually over time compounded.
Here's what I tell people: infrastructure doesn't lie. When something doesn't get painted, it doesn't get painted.
Yeah.
When it doesn't get planted, it doesn't get planted or taken care of. When things start getting ruddy just because of daily use, that's your country talking to you until you look, I'm in need of attention, help.
Yep.
And so first it starts happening to the buildings around and things that are probably low priority, but then it starts happening to the power lines or the water distribution system. And so you get water shortages and electricity shortages and stuff like that. And so infrastructure doesn't lie.
So when you come to America, you said that I loved your analogy of the guppy being put in a large lake or river, whatever you said. Everything is bigger, more expansive, perhaps better run. I don't mean to speak for you. I hope I'm accurately paraphrasing.
No, yeah, that's fair.
What surprised you about America?
Surprise?
Or what surprises you?
The first time I came here, I was 3 years old. So I've been coming here for so long that it's difficult to speak of surprise. Like back then, everything surprised me because I was a kid.
Right.
And now I've been coming here for so long that nothing really surprises me. If anything surprises me is that things are not as pretty as they were 10 years ago. This is exactly what I was talking about. Like that's the violation of expectations comes from that I would call surprise. But I will say this: Americans are some of the nicest people on earth.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
We are.
most of the people in other countries don't give them the credit they deserve for that.
Well, if I may interrupt, I went abroad this summer for 5 weeks. I went to Italy, Malta, England, Ireland, Denmark, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania.
Oh, wow.
And I also was a part of a Catholic immersion program in Rome, which had people from all over the world.
Oh, really?
Who were my age. Yes, all over the world. It was so cool, Joaquin.
Sounds great.
And I noticed that people from other countries, especially Eastern European countries, were far more reserved, far more polite, and by American standards would be considered to be a bit unfriendly or a bit standoffish. And then once I really got to know them, I realized that was not the case at all. It was that their culture is far more reserved than our culture. And the reason why Americans, to your observation, are tended to be seen as more friendly is because we've had the luxury of having societal trust. This is my hypothesis. Yeah, that's a good. And I talk about this with my Eastern European friends, who I now can say I have after this trip. I couldn't say that before the trip. I have, these Eastern European friends. I have many of them. And they say that, even though communism has been over for has been over for 35 years in their countries.
I have thoughts.
Yes, there's still this lingering fear of trusting other people, because your neighbor could rat on you, your family could rat on you. And so our friendliness, I think, is a sign of our American privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. Communism is, in a way, you can...
Oh, communism is alive and well, I believe.
Oh, yeah. You can end communism in a country, but communism is an irreversible process. Communism leaves people in a state of moral diminishment for a very, very long time. And you have to rebuild the moral structure of the country after it. And it's exactly what I was talking about. It's people don't follow the Ten Commandments, and because people don't follow the Ten Commandments, people don't trust each other. Like, it's also been called a high trust society. There are places where you could forget your bag, in a train station in Europe, and you come 24 hours later and it's there. But in some places in the world, you forget your phone on the counter of a bakery, and you come back 5 minutes later and it's not there.
This was my experience in Romania. I had a driver who left his phone at the gas station. We went 10 minutes and he turned around to get it, and I thought, please, in Los Angeles, you could walk out for 5 seconds and realize, and still be in the storefront and it's gone. He went back. It took us 10 minutes. He drove away for 10 minutes and we went back for 10 minutes and it was right there.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of luck of the draw, but Romania used to be a communist country. Some countries in Eastern Europe are recovering, like Poland and Romania.
Yes.
They're recovering their moral bearings, I think. And I think that the only way to do that is for people to start approaching religion again. I don't see any substitute for that. I studied STEM, and I'm very logical about things, and very I used to be very Richard Dawkins, like, oh, I only care about facts, and but religion makes people raise better people, and the time where you become a good person, it's very difficult to become a good person once you're an adult. The time where you become a good person easily is when you're a kid. And so I'm not afraid of the first people who abandon religion. I'm afraid of their children. Because the people who abandoned religion were still raised by parents who told them, you don't steal, you don't do that, you don't lie, you don't say mean things about people if they're not true. In fact, you don't say mean things about people if you can help it. Just keep quiet. And all these things come from a compendium of wisdom that is 2,000 to 5,000 years old. And it's in a book that has many, many stories and many, many aphorisms and moral injunctions. And these things, you can tell when somebody comes from a religious family, because they'll have one whenever you do something like that. You don't do that because they'll give you a passage of scripture or an aphorism or something that's common wisdom. And non-religious people don't transmit that to their children, and so their children have to figure out morality as adults, and that's not easy.
What do you think of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris?
A direct political question.
You don't have to answer. I told Joaquin before the show, if you don't want to go there, you tell me.
All right. Well, Kamala Harris reminds me a little bit of the president in my country.
Who?
Maduro.
Why?
No, because he knows how to embed it. These are people who know how to embed themselves in a system and know how to climb the system successfully, but are not themselves very remarkable. And first of all, I'm going to throw back to my message about avoiding polarization. Like, whatever happens today, don't go attacking people on the opposite side. Don't do that. It's not going to be the end of the world either way, okay? But I do see that if Kamala wins, that we would have more of a government by committee. And
more of a what? I'm sorry?
Government by committee.
Okay.
And things would everything would be inertia, government by inertia. Things would just continue to happen, and the government would react to it, and in the way that is best suited to guarantee the continuance of the party in power. That's what I see. Whereas Trump has an actual agenda. That agenda seems to be grounded in a love for the United States. I like that agenda has collected different people from different parties who are themselves remarkable. I don't know if you saw...
Yes.
That's very important.
Very important.
That's more important than people give credit for. Because
RFK, Elon, Tulsi,
right. And
Joe Rogan.
These are people who wouldn't otherwise agree with each other, but they're forging alliances. I don't know if you're a fan of the Lord of the Rings, but this is like the dwarves and the elves and the humans forging an alliance against Mordor. Anyway,
some people will get it.
Yeah, some people will get it. These are very, very people coming from disparate backgrounds, disparate experiences, with differing points of views that are coming together and forming an alliance in order to fight this thing that seems to be governing by inertia. Some people are afraid of Trump. I'm not that afraid of Trump, but I understand people who are, because, and especially people coming from other countries, there's a constituency of people who fled dictatorships, whether they be from Eastern Europe or from Venezuela, who have also studied in American universities. And that particular constituency, or work with American corporations or in American media institutions. And that constituency, they've been sold on the idea, for example, with Chavez, that the reason that the revolution destroyed Venezuela wasn't that he was a Marxist, but that he was a populist. He was both. And the truth is, I think it was because he was a Marxist. That's what created the poverty and that's what created the pool of people people who would have otherwise invested and created, set roots in society and made it grow. That's what made them flee. Not the fact that he was a populist. Bukele is a populist. Milei is a populist, and we're seeing the opposite processes in Argentina and El Salvador. So, and also, the fact that somebody is a Marxist doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a dictatorship in your hands, because Lula is a Marxist, or Marxist-ish. And there have been other Marxist presidents in Latin America, and they haven't become Cuba, Nicaragua, or Venezuela. So there's no guarantee that you're going to have a dictatorship right off the bat. So that's why I'm saying it's not over yet, okay? Whatever happens, it's not over yet. Don't fret. Personally, I think it would be interesting for Trump to win. It would be, and some people might have a harder time, and people I know might have a harder time, unfortunately. But
you mean outside of the country?
No, here.
You're saying people you know?
Yes, people I know. People I know who are trying to come here legally.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But whose legal process would probably be encumbered by more. It would become a little bit more difficult to go through, and it is a difficult process to go through. Make no mistake.
I'm sure.
So they would probably face a harder time. Unfortunately, I wish, I hope that that's not the case, but if it is, I would rather have them face that than they escape what we're living through in Venezuela and then have to deal with all the same problems over again, like Tren de Aragua and economic instability and these things that they wanted to put behind them and have actually followed us all over the place. They followed us to Spain, they followed us to Chile, they followed us to Colombia. Many people started. The revolution exported itself because we didn't fight it in time, I think.
Why do you think so many people in the United States vote for Kamala Harris, despite what I would characterize as a pretty stark difference between the quality of life under Donald Trump and the quality of life under Biden and Harris?
Did you see Megyn Kelly on Bill Maher?
Sure did.
Did you see how Bill Maher said that the economy was great now and that it was not better under Trump? And then when she brought the facts, he said, "Oh well,
she brought the receipts."
She brought the receipts, yes. And then he said, "Well, no, but that's because he inherited from Obama."
Oh yeah, that was great.
And then she said, "Well, then why is the great economy now not inherited from Trump?" And he goes like, "Let's just switch the topic. Let's move off this." I think there are people who are either not well informed or they haven't given it enough thought, really. And every time they come up against one of these things, they don't deal with it. And I mean, it is to be expected. Most people, the majority of the country, is dealing with having to work, having to raise children, having to, there's so much to deal with already. between I don't have the specifics of how things have progressed here. I know that at home, just buying food was difficult. Just procuring food was difficult. And so people would look for, not only just shop around for bargains, they would actually start contacting each other and trying to talk with people who work at plants and distributions and seeing if they could cut a deal and find boxes of food rather than just shop, at retail. And so people were trying to procure food for the month became a full-time job for most people. And then people working 2-3 jobs aside from that. And so it became harder and harder to live, and people have to deal with that, and they don't really see it. They don't have the time to create the logical chain of events from the political situation to their particular economic situation.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's true. I think another part of it, at least in the United States, is that people are so afraid of not maintaining their status in their class. And among the affluent and, in vogue individuals, they cannot say that they agree with Trump.
Yeah, that's
because they want to. Then everybody will turn on them.
Yeah, that dynamic was a little bit different in my country, because in my country the Marxists were populists, and so that dynamic didn't enter into fighting the Marxists. But here the Marxists are academic; they're academic Marxists. And so there's a lot of status associated with these ideas here, because this country is fundamentally not Marxist. This country, popularly speaking, this country, foundationally speaking, is not Marxist. And so
But Venezuela foundationally is not Marxist.
I mean, not really, but over the course... Here's the thing. We had a very, very strong dictatorship at the beginning of the 19th century, okay? And after that dictatorship, it went through to the middle of the 19th century, to 1953, I think, or 57.
You mean the 20th century?
Oh, sorry, the 20th century. I'm sorry. 1953. And then found the constitution that we had before then wasn't Marxist. But that particular
I see, there was a precedent.
constitution that came after that dictatorship was created by socialist parties. And so the regime that the stability of the regime that we lived under for the 40 years from the 50s to the 90s, I think it was 57, that particularly stable part of our history was foundationally on Marxist principle.
I understand. There's not a precedent.
No.
Well, let's hope it stays that way. I'm curious what you think, and Sean, I don't have an earpiece, so I actually won't be able to hear you, but you can text me. I'm curious what people think will happen. I think Trump is going to win.
Yeah, me too.
I think he's going to win. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but that's what I think. We probably won't know today, but perhaps we will know in the coming days. I think there are so many people who will come out for him that...
Well, I think he has the momentum, and this is common wisdom. I've heard everybody say he has the momentum. He has the momentum. He does. But I expect there might be some shenanigans, and we don't know, and we really don't know, because everything... Like, there comes a time when you can't really trust any polls at all. In Venezuela,
I hope I can't trust the polls. They're saying they're neck and neck. I hope they're wrong.
Yeah, no, there are many push polls, and there are people who we have a particularly well-known case in our country of the most important and prestigious polling company has very well. It is common wisdom that is associated with the government. So, yeah, politics is a dirty business. I think that the true reformation of politics begins at the level of parents raising good people. And if you can manage a couple of generations of that uninterrupted, then it cleans itself out again over the course of time.
I think that's a good note to end on. I emphatically agree. Joaquin, thank you.
It was a pleasure.
And I wish you safe travels back to Venezuela.
Thank you.
And please continue to pray for the United States.
I will.
And before you go, I know you've been wondering about something the whole episode. The whole episode, he's looking like, what is she doing?
What
My
happened?
Pillow.
Oh!
I know you've been wanting to know about My Pillow.
Yes, of course.
Well, here we go. For the first time ever, Joaquin, you can get the standard classic My Pillow for wholesale prices. That's only $14.88. But it gets better. For a limited time, they're offering their entire classic collection at wholesale prices. You can get the queen size My Pillow for just $18.88. Upgrade to a king for only $1 more. Get the body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use My Pillows for only $9.88. Go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Hartman, or call 1-800-566-6745 to take advantage of wholesale pricing. And for the first time ever, on top of that, get free shipping on orders over $75. Go to mypillow.com or call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman. Again, to get the standard classic My Pillow for only $14.88. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you again, Joaquin.
It was my pleasure.
And boy, the next time I sit in this chair, we may be in a different America. Sean's cracking up. I don't know why that incurred a crack up, but I'll ask him in the producer's dungeon once we end the show. Bye, everybody. Take care.